Welcome to the show. This is Good Morning Bangalore. My name is Lee, and right now I've got Prarthana Prasad over the Zoom call. She's also known as the short-haired brown queer on Instagram, and she makes content. She's amazing. Prarthana, hi, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me more about yourself and why you chose to step into the entire field of content creation in the first place.
Well, honestly, I think it's because I personally identify as lesbian. And,
Hmm.
a lot of the times when you hear that word, you're either thinking, okay, this isn't something that really belongs in our country. It's not something that you see often. And
Hmm.
generally, there's just a lot of misconceptions around, the entire LGBTQI community. And I feel like the only way to get rid of that is to, put a genuine face to it and have a genuine conversation about it. So that was sort of my entire reason for getting into content creation. I think no other motivator would have gotten me into social media. I think it is definitely a difficult place to be. But yeah.
Hmm. Believe me, I know because I'm also one of those quote unquote creators, and it is a hard space. The dedication, the consistency, it's a lot. But you seem to be doing it well. You seem to be doing extraordinary job. You also the Cosmopolitans LGBTQ plus communities Voice of the Year, right? Talk
Yes.
to me more about that. How did that feel when you got that prestigious award?
100% unexpected. I only went to the award ceremony because I thought it'd be an interesting experience because I've never been in an environment like that before. And so I
Hmm.
went there and literally they introduced our category and I was cheering another nominee's name because I was sure that they would win. And we're all very close. Everyone who was
Hmm.
nominated for that category because we are all one of the few people who create, genuine LGBTQI content on the internet. So there's a lot of respect there. And yeah, we were cheering someone else's name and then they read out my name instead. I was completely shell shocked. And I was just very grateful that I got something so unexpected come into my life.
Amazing. I'm so glad you're using your voice to help others in the community as well as younger generations open up and just be accepting of who they are, right? With that in mind, let's get to the first question, which is how can we build an atmosphere of inclusion in the entire country, world, whatever?
I think with inclusion, the only way to have that happen is with empathy.
Mhm.
So, we always look at other people's issues like it's their fault, it's because of
Right.
something that they've done, their incompetence, their bad luck, and it has nothing to do with us. We can just laugh about them or we can make fun of them and we can feel better that our lives are going well. And I think because of that, there's a lack of inclusion, there's a lack of understanding. And I feel like the best way to get with that is to understand that anything that's happening to another person can happen to you as well. Anything that
Hmm.
concerns other people is something that should be of concern to you as well if it's like, hurting that person. So I think if you go in with that mindset towards inclusion, it's a lot easier. Then suddenly all of those things like, oh, I don't want to use pronouns. Oh, why is everyone making such a big deal out of these things? This didn't
Hmm.
exist 10, 15 years ago. Why is this suddenly such a huge deal? All of these common arguments that a lot of people, like educated, smart, kind people, use against the LGBTQI community go away because you realize that
Hmm.
hey, it's not like just like a few people's problem. It's everyone's problem that we aren't accepting of, differences. At the end of the day, that's all it is. It's just being accepting towards differences and respecting them.
That is so valid, I would say. Like, I think we forget that completely, and the empathy goes out the window, right? When was the moment that you knew that you were part of the community, and that moment sort of crystallized, and you're like, okay, I think I'm not, going the normal route, as people say.
Damn, I think like that happened at a really young age.
Hmm.
We like to think that kids, especially younger kids, like 3 or 4 years of age, they don't really have any personality. You tell them to do this, they'll do it. It depends on how you
Mm.
raise them. But I think that, from a very young age, we all have like a lot of likes, interests, dislikes. Our personality is in place from, I would
Mm.
say, birth, honestly, in a lot of ways. And that's definitely how I felt because, more than anything else, there was a very particular way that I like to express myself, whether it's clothes,
Hmm.
whether it's my hair, whether it's the kinds of things that I like or dislike. It was very different from what is stereotypically expected of a girl. Like,
Right.
I wanted to wear t-shirts and pants. I wanted to have my hair cut short. And I was asking my parents for all of this when I was like 4 years old. What are you going to say? Are you going to say that media influenced me? That can't be true. I was four. I was watching what every other 4-year-old kid was watching. and I was raised like any other 4-year-old girl was raised. It's just that I had these inherent likes and dislikes, and my parents were kind enough to respect them instead of like, trying to beat it out of me or something like that. And
Lovely.
generally, that's all it is. I think that was definitely one moment which I don't really even remember. It's mostly just hearsay from what my family tells me. But other than that, I think definitely in high school, when I realized that, all of these other girls, they all have like crushes on boys. They all have
Mm,
like, this interest in getting into a relationship with a boy. Meanwhile, I'm just looking at like, my female classmates, my girl best friend, and all of that. I'm like, oh, she's so pretty. And I think at that point, when you see everyone else doing one thing and it feeling natural to them,
mm,
and you just don't feel it naturally, I think that's when it really crystallized for me. And of course, like these are two really separate aspects of my identity, how I want
right,
to express myself and my sexuality. They don't really go hand in hand, but for my personal experience, it's very, cohesive.
right, right. Now, another question I want to ask you is that the public doesn't know too much about the community, right? So, what do you wish the public knew about the community?
I think the one thing I'd want them to know is that it's a really valid thing. I think
Hmm.
a lot of people, they believe that, okay, it's a phase, it's something that's just, something that'll pass, something that'll get over, and you'll go back to being normal and, being like quote unquote
Mm,
heterosexual and normal and cisgendered and just fine again. So there's this idea that it's something that can change, and it's really not.
right.
It's a really natural thing. It's existed throughout our history. It's
Yeah.
existed
Yeah.
throughout like global history, instances of it. It's just that, there was a lot of erasure from history of things that didn't work with the mainstream narrative. We need to
Hmm.
realize that, it's completely normal, it's completely natural, and a lot of people do experience it. Friends, family, people that you might not even realize are going through this would most definitely likely be going through this. And we just need to offer them the sort of understanding to, talk to us about it. So I would say that's the main thing, like to stop thinking of it as abnormal and to stop thinking of it as
Mm,
something that can change. I understand maybe for a lot of people listening in, it's not their reality. They've never experienced anything like this, so they think it's
right.
not true. But just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it's not true. Like, to be honest, if you've never in real life met, like, let's say, an American person, you're not going to think that Americans don't exist just because you've never
Right.
experienced that sort of, it's just a bad example, but essentially it
No, the idea
does.
comes across. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Definitely.
it's a really it's a valid thing, and we should respect it.
That's amazing. I think that's what, if anyone listening out there, please remember this. Now, the entire process of coming out is a huge step, in a person's life, especially if you're part of the community. Um, Even in your coming out process, what would be the best thing to say, or what you want to hear from other people?
I think the best thing, honestly, if this, let's say I'm coming out to someone and that person genuinely
Right.
wants to offer me support and
Hmm.
understanding, I
Hmm.
think the best thing usually is to treat it normally. Of course,
Mm.
there's two ways that it can go bad. You can either treat it poorly, like, oh God, what are you doing? Are you sure? I don't think you know anything about
Right.
this. Or there is, oh, why didn't you tell me earlier? How could you, not share this with me? Didn't you think I would be accepting? Why
Mm.
would you hide it from me? And either one of these reactions is sort of making it about yourself. So I think my
Right.
genuine advice is, if someone
Right.
comes to talk to you about, okay, I might be queer, I might be gay, I think it's best to just make it about them and offer them whatever they
Hmm.
want in the moment instead of making it about yourself. Even if you're an amazing friend, amazing family member, it's a lot harder for them than it is for you. So that's
Mm.
definitely something to keep in mind. And just treating them as normally as possible is definitely the best reaction. You don't have to be like, too over the top either way about it, because, it's a very normal thing about people and we should treat it like that.
In your, coming out journey, what were the difficulties that you faced, if you don't mind sharing that with us? And
Mhm.
what was it like for you?
I think the most difficult part about coming out for me was definitely coming out to my parents. And I think this
Hmm.
is a universal, experience within the LGBTQI community. The hardest thing of all the like hundreds of people that I've spoken to is always, I don't know how to come out to my parents, because that
Right.
is where
Right.
so much, such a poor reaction can come about. You can cause so much disappointment and hurt to your parents. And a lot of the times the reactions we get from, family members especially is, how could you do this to us? You should change this. We'll take you to a doctor. We'll fix
Mm.
this. It's a phase. It's fine. Those are like a lot of common reactions, and a lot of those reactions come from a place of, okay, fine, this is definitely something that has to go away now.
Mm.
And that can be really, really hurtful to hear, and it can be really, physically harmful. Like there's a lot of like physical violence, mental harm that can come out of coming out to your parents. But what we need to understand is no one has tried to change themselves more than the queer person themselves. Like they have probably
Mm.
cross questioned and worried and, stressed about this a lot, and looked for any other alternative or any other possibility that maybe this isn't real, because that's the kind of society we live in. It's a pretty scary place to be a queer person. So if someone is coming out to you, that means they are truly 100% sure of it. And definitely for me, I had to convince my family of that. I had to convince my
Mm.
parents that, this is who I am and I'm not going to change. It's only a decision of whether you want to continue to have me in your life or not.
Mm.
And of course, that's a really difficult thing to tell your parents. And it really goes to show how scary societal norms can be. They can be completely illogical, but still cause things that are stronger than love, that are stronger than, a parent-child relationship. All
Mm.
of that can go to nothing if, societal norms don't happen to work out. So it's definitely a really, really scary situation for a lot of people. And it was definitely a scary situation for me as well.
Thank you for sharing that with me, Prarthana. It's so nice of you to do that. Um, any advice to parents, when the kids coming out to them, uh, things to keep in mind? Maybe they can read up on certain things so that they can be more aware about what the entire process is.
Definitely, I think there is a wealth of information, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand that information isn't always accessible because of maybe the language, because of maybe like sometimes some questions can seem so, I don't know, homophobic or ignorant that maybe you don't get the
Mm.
best answer to it. You might just get, hateful things pointed towards you. Or just generally, I do understand that maybe it's not the easiest thing to find correct resources, but there is a wealth of information online if you're willing to look into it.
Right.
And I think generally what I want to say to parents is that your child is definitely going to turn out fine if they have your support. Nothing that happens in
Mm.
society, in their future relationships, friendships, or career can hurt them as much as your rejection can hurt them. A lot of parents, they come from a place of worry, like you need to change this about yourself because your life is going to be horrible if you try to live it as
Mm.
a gay person or as a transgender person. You should change it. What they don't realize is they are their child's number one enemy. It's not anyone else. It's not society. If you have your parental support, you can get through anything that society throws your way, because at least you have your
Mm.
family and, people that love you. So
Right.
that's what I would
Right.
like to, say to anyone who's in that situation.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. One of my last questions is that there are a lot of misconceptions about the Indian community, right? Can you break a myth for us and tell us something that's not entirely true that most people believe?
I think a lot of people believe that it's sort of against nature, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not really true. It's not something that's biologically against nature. A lot of people say, well, the entire point of the human race is to have kids, and if there is a relationship that can't procreate, then what's the point? Well, to be
Mm.
honest, a lot of infertile heterosexual cisgender people are infertile, and
Mm-hmm.
they get married, they have kids, and a lot of people choose not to have children, and a lot of biology isn't always that straightforward. I mean, if the
Mm-hmm.
human race is just here to procreate, a lot of our modern ways of living just go out the window. And it's something that we see very naturally in, throughout biology, throughout the animal kingdom. So I would say that that's the number one argument I always come across, that it's unnatural and it doesn't
Mm.
make any sense. But if you look at our history and if you look at biology, that's not true. And I think one last thing that I'd like to say about a common myth about, the
Mm.
LGBTQI community is that it's a Western trend. That this is an especially a very desi Indian argument that we hear. that it's
Mm,
something that's a very Western concept. America did it, UK did it. We can't let our precious, historical culture get
culture.
ruined
Yeah.
because of this. Yeah.
Mm,
And that is, I think, the most untrue argument of all that can be said against the LGBTQI community. Because if you actually do look at India's history and culture, we were much more accepting historically of these sort of variations in people than any other culture. And it was actually the
mm,
British, when they came to colonize us, who introduced laws that sort of outlawed all of these things, because the British had a very particular idea of what was proper, and they thought they were civilizing our nation by giving us all of these rules
mm,
and outlawing things like homosexuality. And before that, actually, there was hardly, no one really batted an eye towards, queer folks and towards transgender
mm.
folks, and they were given some place in society as well. And, we really do need to look at true
Bring those
information
days
rather,
back. Yeah. Yeah.
bring those days back, get rid of the bias, and definitely appreciate our culture for what it is, which is, more accepting than we think it is.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Pratna, for joining this morning to talk to me more about the community and enlightening all of us as well on a little bit more about this. I learned so much, and I think one thing you want to say to anybody else listening in, who's probably scared to come out, or who's afraid of taking that first step. Anything you want to say to them?
Definitely. I think that your fear is completely justified.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a lot of people go through this. I think every person who's part of the LGBTQI community, they feel a lot of fear, guilt, and shame going through it. And the most important thing to remember is that you're not alone. It might feel like you're alone because as a community, we're not sometimes the most open in Indian society, because it's not very safe for a lot of us to do it. So it might feel like you are truly the only one going through this right now. And that feeling of loneliness can be worse than anything else. So it's best to keep in mind that you're definitely not alone. There's a lot of people going through the same thing you are, and a lot of people who care about you, who will support you. And truly, no matter how bad the situation feels, it will get better. It can get better, and it does get better.
Awesome. Thank you so much once again. Have a great day, Pratna, and enjoy the rest of your morning.
Thank you so much. Bye bye. Thank you.